All right. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're dialing in from around the world. We'll just wait a couple of minutes as more attendees filter in. Thank you so very much for taking the time to join our webinar. We have an exciting discussion ahead, so we'll just wait a couple of minutes. You should see a fun little poll popping up on your screen throughout this webinar. We're going to be asking some questions, so we figured we have a fun one to get the ball rolling. Are you a fan of a real Christmas tree or a fake Christmas tree? We'd love to know, especially if you look at it through the lens of sustainability. I'm curious to see what data comes in. So we'll just wait a minute or so again to give more people time to filter in. Sneha, Nick, do you have an opinion? Are you real trees or fake trees or no trees?
I'm personally on Team Realtree, but we were debating the LCA on either of them before, so I think we need to get some more data before we make a decision here.
I have planted a real tree and I always decorate the same tree every
Real
Christmas.
tree?
Yeah.
It's all about the smell.
But
You can't replicate that scent.
The real pine smell, that's so true. All right, just a few more seconds again and we'll get going. All right. So we have a good, I think we have a good number of people who've joined. Kate, let's see some results. Oh, okay. We have more real tree fans in the audience. That's always good to know. I'm curious for anyone who's attending if you've ever conducted an LCA on a real tree versus a fake tree, or if you have any data on the sustainability impact of a real tree versus a fake tree, feel free to drop it in the chat for all the attendees. I'm sure just this season, people would love to know a little bit more about the impact they're having as they celebrate. All right, so thank you so very much again for taking the time to join. My name is Rajiv Jalim, and I'm the Global Director of Sustainability Solutions here at Novisto. I am not the star of this show by any means. I'm very, very excited to introduce you to our two presenters who will be leading a lot of the conversation on mastering those climate risks around the California regulations. But before we jump into the meat of the conversation, a few housekeeping rules. So the session is being recorded and will be circulated after to all attendees and registrants. And if you have any questions throughout, we do have dedicated Q&A time at the end of the webinar. So if you have any questions that pop up or any comments, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'll collect those and then towards the end of the webinar, we'll respond. If any of the questions that come in fit into the natural flow of the topic being discussed, I'll obviously intervene and throw some at Nick and Sneha. But without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to our two presenters today. So we have Sneha Pulki from Gist Impact, and Sneha is the head of Natural Capital, and she's a senior manager at Gist, and she works with corporate and financial institutions to help them with their climate and their nature-related disclosures. So very much a key component of today's topics. She also helps them develop some of the strategies associated with their risk transition plans. And of course, all of that is wrapped into the context of regulatory reporting, especially as we're looking at California regulations today. Also joining the call is Nick Sancatier. Nick is our Director of Partnerships and Strategy here at Novisto. And Nick really helps drive value for clients all around the world through that ecosystem approach of tech partners. So for those who may not know, Novisto and Gist Impact are an example of a partnership, successful partnership, where we bring two niche technologies together to maximize the value that we deliver for our clients. So very, very happy to have both of these SMEs on the call today. To get us going, just so you know what the agenda is, we're going to flow through a presentation because we do have some content that we want to share with you after. So it is going to be a presentation style webinar with some dedicated Q&A time at the end and a couple polls scattered throughout. So keep your eyes on your screen. The poll will pop up. We'll ask you to vote and then we'll discuss some of the results. As a reminder, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll address as we flow. Nick, I'm going to pass to you to kick us off.
Awesome. Thanks, Rajiv. So we're just going to start off with a little bit of a primer on the California climate disclosures. I'm sure a lot of you are aware of some of this at the very least, so it may be a refresher, but just to level set, we want to just really talk through what these disclosures really entail. So 253 and 261 collectively represent the California climate disclosures, and they have kind of different constituents on both sides. So 253 is really focused on the GHG emissions reporting side of things, and then 261 is oriented around climate-related financial risk disclosures. So you'll notice that collectively, these do really mirror the TCFD framework from a reporting standpoint. So none of this is really new to the market. We've seen a lot of this before, although there are a few key distinctions between the California climate disclosures and TCFD. So the California disclosures do require public posting of the information on company websites. There's an assurance element to the 253 side of things, so having the emissions footprinting and reporting assured. This will start with limited assurance and will evolve to reasonable assurance over time. There also has to be direct filing with the California Air Resources Board, and there are material penalties for failure to disclose, while 261 mandates action plans. Now, a lot of you may have been following the recent news, while 253 will be continuing on in terms of enforcement. There has been a recent halt to SB 261. It has been appealed by the US Chamber of Commerce as well as other plaintiffs. But it's important to note that while it has been appealed, it has not been repealed. So this is very much kind of in limbo for the time being, which does pause the mandate starting in Jan 1st, 2026. So really the role today is, while we could spend this session speculating on the outcome of the appeal, we really want to focus the time on what we know to be certain. So we're going to be really focusing on 261, ironically, even though it is the portion of the California disclosures that is subject to that appeal. And the reason being is because we feel that climate risk is so omnipresent that irrespective of the outcome of the appeal, we think it's an essential component of the overall disclosures, and something that is really relevant to, we assume, everyone in the audience today. There's a lot of reasons to be getting a head start on 261. So we feel that there's firstly a breadth of data and insights that can come from conducting a climate risk assessment, whether it's your first time doing this or you're refreshing a previous exercise. And the nice thing about having kind of the extension or a bit of the buffer that the halt of 261 provides is that you can focus on gathering that data and insights without the additional kind of compliance risk or burden that does come with those kind of discrepancies that I previously spoke to versus TCFD reporting. It's also worth noting that because it has not been repealed, in the case that the injunction is lifted, companies would potentially have to retroactively report. So there's definitely a future-proofing element to getting prepared and disclosing against 261 in advance. And then while 253 is still mandated, a lot of the disclosures around emissions serve as essential foundations to climate risk. So if you're already going through the process of gathering and measuring your emissions footprint, you can really leverage this information and get it, and it gives you a head start on 261 reporting. But beyond all of this, we find that there's a lot of factors beyond the California requirements that really lend to the rationale for having a grasp on climate risk. So from a disclosure standpoint, we see extensive interoperability between the California disclosures and the other kind of mainstream global framework standards regulations that are out there. So you'll see this kind of consistent theme where there is a very similar prescribed evaluation of both physical climate risk and transition climate risk across these various disclosures. So because these key pillars are so consistent across the board, if you are going through your first instance of evaluating transition risk and physical climate risk, this starts to unlock a lot of interoperability and enabling you to expand your reporting horizons and align with some of these international disclosures, whether it's IFRS or otherwise. And then conversely, if you already happen to be reporting against some of these other disclosures, then it really enables you to easily produce a report aligned to 261, even on a voluntary basis. So we've seen that CARB just announced that they've opened up kind of the submission guidelines for reporting on a voluntary basis. So that avenue is definitely still open.
Nick, if I may jump in there, from the organizations that you've chatted with around the world, I imagine those that have begun some version of risk reporting or risk management have found it easier to then move towards California regulations. Is that what you've seen?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if they're already reporting in alignment with TCFD, then they already have all the foundations to disclose against 261. So it's a very low lift if you're already kind of reporting in alignment with one of those interoperable disclosures that we shared. Okay, perfect. So even more importantly, beyond the disclosure interoperability, the fact is risk is very much real. And while policy and rhetoric may evolve and change over time, the one thing about climate risk is it remains unperturbed by these things. So we just kind of flashed a few different instances here of extreme weather events or climate-related events over the past year or so that have really impacted organizations from a financial standpoint. So it's clear that this is really posing a material risk on businesses. We see climate change adaptation and mitigation being kind of two of the most material topics for organizations around the globe. So all of this really pointing to a much larger cause and reason to be having a grasp on climate risk beyond, again, the California disclosures. Okay, perfect. And then as we can see here, companies are starting to internalize this fact. So we are really seeing adoption of risk-related solutions and having kind of more measurement and data tied to evaluating climate risk. So this adoption is definitely increasing over time. So it has been good to see that companies are, seeing the real kind of material value to getting a hold on their climate risk. So kind of all that to say, while there does remain some uncertainty around 261, we are seeing that the evaluation of climate risk are much more than just simply a best practice, but this kind of is turning into an essential business activity. So if we come back to the California disclosures, we have kind of positioned organizations in terms of kind of archetype and readiness into these three buckets here. So it's a mix of foundational starters. These are organizations that are just getting familiar with their kind of exposure. They may not have gone through an emissions footprinting exercise yet. So they're really at the beginning of the journey. And then next we have carbon ready but risk early organizations. So they have already tracked their emissions. They have at least kind of operational footprinting underway and maybe are starting to endeavor into value chain footprinting. Might have been disclosing against some of these adjacent frameworks or questionnaires, whether it's GRI or CDP, for example. But they still haven't endeavored on a more exhaustive risk assessment exercise. And then lastly, we have the more advanced reporters who are going to the extent of actually attributing financial impacts to their climate-related risk. And some organizations might kind of fall in between these buckets. So for example, we are currently working with a large business in the hospitality industry, and they kind of fall in between that foundational starter and carbon ready, but risk early journey. What's been quite interesting with them is despite the kind of halt to 261, they're still very much proceeding with the process and seeing a lot of value in taking time to get their data right and their inputs into the exercise so they can get the most benefit out of the results from their climate risk assessment.
And to that point, Nick, it's mainly because they recognize that whether reporting is mandated or not, their industry, their business will face the impacts of climate risk significantly as they're already experiencing, correct? So they really want to move from that foundational, just starting point of risk assessment to a more advanced version, correct?
Indeed. Yeah, it is a journey. And I think as we kind of shared with some of those news stories and the data trends around adoption of solutions, which kind of reflects the maturity of organizations, I think there is a growing awareness and yeah, we are seeing that unfold over time. So I think it's a good time to pause and turn back to the audience and
Yeah,
see where all of you sit on your current journey, whether
absolutely.
it's in terms of, the California disclosures or more broadly when it comes to carbon accounting and climate risk.
Yeah. So even if you're not within scope for California, we're curious to know where do you land on your risk assessment journey, especially as it relates to climate risk. So you should have a poll up on your screen right now. Feel free to select one of the three answers. We know there are so many nuances to some of these maturity levels, but we're quite curious to see where you all land. Just wait a few seconds or so as data starts coming in. All right. Kate, what do we have? What's our data looking like? Oh, wow. Okay. I will admit, I'm pleasantly surprised. We're seeing over 50% of the audience has already done TCFD or ISSB reporting. So that means I imagine there is some amount of understanding on the concepts of risk and where you might want your risk program to develop over time. As expected, we're seeing the majority, if you were to add them up, we're seeing, a big chunk of the organizations either just starting or doing their carbon accounting but have not begun their risk journey. So we have people across all three buckets. Sneha, Nick, any initial feedback on the data? Is it what you expected?
It was surprising for me. I expected many people to be in the middle bracket, but it is really good to know that many of them are very advanced user. Good to know.
Yeah, I'd say my takeaway is fairly similar. I would have expected probably the middle bucket to be the most prominent. But it is true that, I mean, TCFD reporting has been quite widespread historically, or if organizations are reporting implicitly against TCFD through the new ISSB standards. But I think we've seen as well with TCFD and ISSB, it's very much a journey. So I'm sure there's a lot of different subcategories within that bucket too.
Yeah, and I have also seen some of the people who has already been doing TCFD report now want to actually shift to IFRS S2 as well. So they are trying to figure out how they can use their existing TCFD to now sort IFRS S2 report as well. So I have seen some example, but it was pleasure to know so many people are into the third bracket.
All right, sounds good. So before we jump into the next topic on climate-related financial risk disclosure, Nick, can you walk us through a little bit about how the ecosystem approach, the tech ecosystem approach, can help organizations move from, let's say, a stage one in the maturity all the way through to a stage three?
Yeah, absolutely. So now that we've kind of set the stage a little bit on where the current status of 253 and 261 is, and really presenting that kind of the broader sort of incentives for having a grasp on your greenhouse gas emissions and climate risk, we wanted to talk a little bit about how we actually support organizations through that journey. So we'll just briefly touch on 253 first. When it comes to ensuring that you have your emissions accounted for, obviously the first year is going to be more focused on operational greenhouse gas accounting, and it will be evolving afterwards into full value chain footprinting through Scope 3. And Scope 3 is a journey on its own. You can start with more estimate-driven data and really evolve to high-resolution insights on your supply chain and downstream impact that can then help you on your decarbonization journey. So through all of those kind of stages of maturity, we can really support you with our carbon management ecosystem. So we do have a handful of carefully selected carbon management partners. These are combined with Navisto to really deliver a holistic carbon management and ESG reporting workflow. So you can have a grasp on your emissions. You can start simple, again, with just kind of Scope 1 and 2 reporting, have a lot of automation supporting you in terms of gathering that data and transforming it into emissions calculations. And then those outputs can be paired with the other disclosure requirements that you might have for 253 or otherwise in the Navisto platform to prepare your reports that you actually need to submit. So that's kind of a little bit on 253. And of course, everything is assurance ready. So you're prepared for those limited assurance and eventual reasonable assurance requirements. And then when it comes to 261, we really ensure that we are supporting on the risk side of things through our partnership with Just Impact. So this is where we'll be kind of speaking next to how you can leverage data, research, and insights to uncover information on climate risk and prepare your disclosures for climate risk, whether it's on the physical risk side or on the transition risk side of things. And similar to as I shared on the 253 considerations, similarly, Navisto can be paired really nicely downstream from this risk assessment piece as a reporting workflow where you can start to gather the various additional disclosure requirements, prepare your content, commenting on your governance around climate risks, the insights that you've uncovered through the process. And as we saw earlier with the interoperability slide, Navisto is designed to enable that automatically. So once you've gathered that relevant information for one disclosure, we make it really easy to scale that across all of the different related disclosure needs. So with that, I wanted to introduce the audience to Just Impact. Just Impact is one of our closest partners at Navisto, and we're really excited to showcase how they solve for climate risk in a much more streamlined way than what we've seen historically. So they've got a lot of great innovations that they've brought forward. Highly reputable organization, as you can see here from some of the credentials on the screen. And I will pass it over to Sneha.
Thank you, Nick. I think you have very well covered how the regulation landscape is, how it is evolving, and what to expect. So I will not spend any more time in dwelling into what the current state looks like. But what I want to discuss more about is now how people can go about climate-related financial disclosures. So my first slide is going to be how companies can if you can shift to the next slide, Nick. Yeah. How companies can approach climate-related risk assessment of any sort. So the first step would be to choose a reporting framework, because now these reporting frameworks give you a standard guideline about how to identify, assess, or report your climate-related financial risk. Once you know, like Nick has already briefly mentioned, that you can go with like TCFD or IFRS S2, which is TCFD evolving into IFRS S2 as some of the initial frameworks where you can, which you can use for your risk assessment journey. So the current slide actually represent 4 pillars, which many of you know, because I know that 50% of people have selected that they have already started on their journey. So these 4 pillars must be very familiar for all of you, that you go through different steps of, like, say, governance, strategy, or risk management, and followed by setting target and metrics. So governance is very much about like who is going to take the responsibility about your climate risk, or whether your board or management is on board. Strategy is something where you can actually identify what the material risk and opportunities looks like for your business operations. That could be over the different time horizon. It could be short, medium, long-term time horizon. And once you identify this risk and opportunity, now you have to figure out how you integrate this risk and opportunity into your overall enterprise risk management, and conduct the training or ensure everyone is aware of the risk, or what kind of measures management is going to take as a part of it. And the last step, which is about setting targets and metrics, you can, of course, like if you are complying with 253, you are already doing some part of measurement, which could be your scope 1, 2, 3 emissions. But along with that, now you can also report what the material risk looks like for your business operation, and how you can set up the quantitative targets linking to each of these risk and opportunity metrics. So now on the next slide, I want to focus much more about the components which goes behind the scene, taken from this particular screenshot taken from the TCFD. You can see that overall there are 3 major components, I would say, which we need to focus on. One is risk, which could be your physical risk, again categorized into acute risk, which is something, say, wildfire, which are very much prominent in North America, or like, say, chronic risk, which is, say, extreme temperatures or like sea level rises. Apart from that, you can also look at various transition risk component, be it a policy and legal changes, or how market or technology is changing and what kind of risk it brings to your businesses. And then the second component is like opportunities, like every risk is can also be translated into opportunity metric, which actually helps you figure out the resilience opportunities or energy or resource efficiency measures, which you can incorporate as a part of your business operation. Risk and opportunity feeds into your strategic decision making. And also, the third component, which now I want to come across, is about anticipated financial effect. This is where you figure out how these risk and opportunity are going to financially impact your business operation, via knowing how it's going to impact your revenue, or like whether there is going to be change or increase in your expenditures and so on. All these elements of climate risk, opportunity, and financial impacts can be viewed for the baseline years, as well as you can also perform different scenarios and time horizon. Now, on the next slide, what I have done is given you a brief snapshot of like what we are offering as climate risk suite in different categories. So you can see that in physical risk, we look after 18 geospatial layers, which are, some of them are climate related, some are water related, but these are not the water as in standalone water. These are the risks which are arising from the climate, and that's why are applicable for your SB 261 reporting. This risk layers, you just need to tell us what kind of like data inputs you have, like which are as simple as you giving us the asset locations which you have, or like telling us how important these assets or type of assets they are. And with this much information, we can identify what different perils or hazards which are applicable to different assets, how your risk profile changes one location versus other location, and then aggregate these physical risk at your corporate level. Now, in terms of transition risk, we offer 12 different layers, which looks into your sectoral profile, which looks into where you are operating and the places where you are operating, how the regulatory or socio-economical landscape is changing. So that's why, like, for example, say if you are your geography incorporate some kind of carbon taxations, and then that in a way is going to have some kind of transition risk to your business operation. Once you do your physical and transition risk assessment, you can use these data sets to calculate or understand what the anticipated financial effect these two or like various risk categories are going to have on your business operation. We look at anticipated financial effect from various levers. Like 5 of them are mentioned here, which could be value at risk, or it could be revenue at risk calculations, and so on. And like in previous slide, I mentioned that you can calculate your baseline risk, but at the same time, when you want to do a futuristic planning or resilience planning, you want to also look at your scenario analysis. And that's where we offer 3 different frameworks, which again constitute of like 12 odd plus scenarios, which you can use to calculate your future risk. And also on various time horizon, you can choose your time horizon, whether you want to look at the short term or like long term time horizons. Next slide, please, Nick. We talked about we take the simple inputs from you, we use our analytical capability to run the models, and as a part of all these assessment, you can see these kind of final quantitative assessment or slides or like results which we generate as a part of this analysis. Of course, because if it depends on like what level of information and data you provide to us, but the best case scenario, we will be able to provide you each hazard type wise how your asset exposure changes. We also give you the quantitative numbers which can support your decision making and help you connect these risk and about like risk in terms of like dollar level impact valuation, so that it becomes very easily understandable and translated in terms of like business risk and sizing of the risk. This is the analytics capability which we have, but in the next slides, what we are showcasing is like how we can translate these analytics in terms of sample output reports. So these reports could be TCFD or IFRS aligned report. We also support it with the detailed Excel sheet so that if you want to deep dive into any of these elements, you can do it on your own. And of course, we help you with the technical support as well, because if you have any kind of questions, we're very happy to do the deep dive for you. That's it from my end. But any questions which you have, because I see that these slides probably are very basic for the advanced users. But if you want to deep dive any further or have any questions, happy to answer those. Or like even if you have any questions such as like we don't really know where to start or what kind of input or output looks like or how much time it takes, we can discuss this more if you want.
Thank you so very much for sharing, Sneha. I'm particularly excited from the conversations I've had with organizations out there. Many of them are struggling with the quantitative components of risk assessment, climate risk assessment. So I'm particularly excited about the data that you showed on how you can actually bring quantitative elements into the climate risk program. So that's actually just on the nose. I can't believe how fast half an hour goes. But we do have another poll question that we'd love to hear from you all. So there should be a poll popping up on your screen right now. And the question is, which approach, and you have 4 options on screen, which approach best fits your organization's readiness for climate risk assessment? And I think this question is even more appropriate given the results from the last poll where more than half of the audience had actually already started on this journey. So I'm quite curious to see what some of the data yields. Just wait another minute or so. While we're waiting for people to respond to the poll, we do have one question that came in through the Q&A. And the question has been to either Nick or Sneha. Has this been confirmed that SB 261 disclosure is halted and that the deadline is not January 1st, 2026? Would you like to clarify on the deadline?
We don't really know the new deadlines, but we know that the deadline, which was 1st January 2026, is halted for now. Companies were really stressed about these analytics and they didn't really know how to approach. So in a way, it's halted, and that's why you can take much more time to run your analytics, collect the data, and feel comfortable with the data you are collecting for the assessment.
And to think January is less than a month away, that would be scary.
Yeah, exactly.
Kate, can we pull up the results? There we go. All right. So, wow. Also a bit surprised. Okay. So we're seeing that the majority of respondents need tailored analytics and guidance in helping to get the organization ready for climate risk assessment. That sounds about right, at least based on the conversations I've had with organizations. Sneha, Nick, does that track so far that the majority of corporations you've spoken to need tailored analytics and guidance?
Yeah, I guess just share my perspective. The compliance burden has been, for a lot of the organizations that we speak to, quite pronounced this year. Especially we have, CSRD has just been kicking off. You have a lot of multinationals, especially, that have to not just consider 1 or 2 of these different disclosure requirements, but a handful of them. So having systems and tools that can streamline the process is definitely preferred. And so yeah, we've definitely seen a growing appetite for that. And there's been, having solutions like Just Impact that can fulfill that demand has been really exciting to see too. I think, a year or 2 ago versus today, things have evolved so much. And then if we look to how that's going to unfold over the next couple of years as that technology only improves further, I'm very excited to see how we can further support organizations over time.
Yep, that's fair. Sneha, I'd like to punt a second question to you following up on Nick's comment. 20% of the audience actually said they're going to build it, I guess, their climate risk assessment. They're going to build it themselves using tools. And I'm going to assume when they say build it themselves, they're probably going to try and build an internal tool as well as a component of the program. What have you seen with organizations who've taken the approach of building it themselves?
I have seen quite a few organizations also asking let us do it on our own. So DIY kind of platform. And that's why we have also created a platform for organization to actually go and put their asset location like details and then figure out what kind of hazard or their exposures are. So I think this comes from the fact that it's a iterative process. So you don't really know when you do it for the first time, right? Like you just want to realign once again. You want to check one versus other asset. We want to check the relative performance and risk scores and so on. So I think I have also seen some of the users who are looking for the tools which helps them with the quantitative part. And of course, the qualitative part is something they can take internally with their stakeholders, or their internal teams can align with their leadership, and so on.
Okay, so that's sort of that self-service vision, correct?
Sorry?
That's sort of that self-service vision.
Yeah, self-service version. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. So we do have another question that came in, and Sneha, this one might go to you as well. You presented some data, some numerical data, and sort of the financial impact that some of these risk categories can have. And the question is, how are you estimating that financial impact? I guess the root question is, where is that data coming from? Is it based on some database out there? Is it based on secondary literature? Is it based on mathematical estimates? How are you estimating that financial impact?
Yeah, I would say it's mathematical estimations. So I briefly mentioned that we need some of the inputs from the organization, be it like as simple as your asset location or type of asset. What we do is take this kind of basic information along with some of the financial number, could be revenue, could be your asset value. We use this information which is provided by our clients, and then overlay it with our hazard layers. And in a way, then based on various scenarios, we can calculate it, the anticipated financial effect, which you can see for a different time horizon and based on whatever scenarios user chooses.
Okay.
It is a lot more technical capabilities which our team use using Monte Carlo simulation and so on to end up like coming with the final numbers with giving you certainty, uncertainty estimates and bounds and so on.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'll invite any of our attendees when we do send the follow-up information. You're always welcome to reach out to Nick and Sneha for deeper dives into some of these data sets and programs and strategies and even the technology that we mentioned on today's call. Before we wrap up, last question that I guess I'll ask to both of you all. But first, Nick, I'll go to you. If I remember the data correct from the first poll, I think 23% or so of the audience had not begun this journey. And I'm not just talking about the climate risk journey. I'm going to assume they haven't begun the carbon accounting journey either. So they have not started. So those are the newbies. Any tips with all the organizations that you've worked with? Any tips or strategies that you can recommend to that 23% group on how they can get started?
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate these things can seem daunting when you're looking at all of it at once. But the keyword that I know we've been weaving throughout the presentation and Rajiv just shared is indeed journey. So it's taking that first step. And the first step doesn't have to be a colossal leap. The scope 1 and 2 requirements, for example, for 253 that are starting next year, this is something that can be done in a relatively low lift way. And there are technology solutions like those partners that we work with that can not only support you with doing this in a digitized fashion, but can also provide the support and kind of hand holding to help you identify where that data resides, what's, kind of the sort of MVP approach you can use to get up and running in that first year. And then you can just iterate on that over time. So we have a variety of organizations across different parts of the world, different industries, different sizes, and they're all at different stages of this journey. So that's completely okay. And similarly on the risk side, you don't have to, as we showed with those kind of 3 archetypes. Yes, there's, there is kind of an evolution there, and you can go really deep on risk, but you can also get kind of a surface level view and then dive deeper over time. So those are just some initial thoughts from my side.
I appreciate it. Thanks so very much for sharing it. Sneha, last question to you. With all the organizations you've helped on their journey, what's sort of been the most common strategy that they've employed that sort of set them up for success on their climate risk journey?
I have seen of course, the organization who comes for climate risk assessment, either they are ready with their ShareG inventories or calculations, or sometimes they want to do things parallelly. But what I'm seeing is start with whatever you have, and then over the period of time, you can like keep improving the data analytics. We also at many times do a lot of back and forth with the user and clients so that we give them a best practice or framework to collect the data or information, and of course start with whatever they have, and then the whole idea is to keep improving the framework over the period of time. So rather than waiting for the time where you just have the best possible input data, we rather start with what we have and reasonable assumptions and then help them improve their analytics further. So it's like getting one result out and then trying to improve the accuracy over the period of time.
Sounds like a successful approach to me. Nick, you want to pull up the last slide? All right, well, that's coming up. Thank you so very much, everyone, for taking the time to join our webinar. You'll see the contact information presented on the last slide shortly. Key takeaways from today's webinar: data-backed approaches are critical, whether you are now starting a journey, whether you're in the middle of your journey, whether you've already prepared a TCFD report in the past or already prepared an ISSB report. I think we can all appreciate taking a data-driven approach is going to set you up for success, and it's going to save you a lot of the rework in the future as you start course correcting on your programs. There are tools out there to help you. Beyond Excel sheets, beyond doing this on your own, you're not on this journey alone. It's important that you embrace the success of partners around you, people who are specialists in these different areas and who can help accelerate and leapfrog different components of your program. And then, if you do have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to reach out. As a reminder, we will follow up with the recording of today's session. Thank you so very much, Sneha, Nick, for taking the time to walk us through this presentation. I know it was a lot to cover in about 30 to 35 minutes, but I do appreciate you walking us through climate risk assessment. So thanks very much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll chat soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.